Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Bearden, and I'm your host today and your presenter. We're all the way up to 61. Wow, May 12th. Who would have thunk? So, thank you everybody for joining. And let's get rolling quickly today because we have a lot to go through. I'd like to thank our various sponsors, as always, for making Webinar Wednesday possible. The County of Kern, CSUB's Business and Public Administration, Mid-State Development Corporation. We're powered by SBA and also the Governor's Office of Economic Development and Business. So thank you all, and it's great to be here again and be here with our three-county region right here, the SBDC territory covering Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties, and headquartered in downtown Bakersfield. We are providing services in those three counties in our Central California region that spans from the Pacific Ocean to the state of Nevada. We also have centers located in Clovis and Merced, Modesto, Salinas, and San Luis Obispo. If you have any questions, contact your local SBDC. If you have any questions after today, you can email me or you can actually reach out to your local SBDC and get the answer that you need. Gee, what's happening today, May 12th, 2021? A lot is happening. And we're finding that a great deal is happening. Last week, we came on and said we had breaking news about PPP and PPP 2021 funding, which basically ended last week, we thought. We did realize back then at the time that we needed to find some CDFIs that were doing that. We think we've done that. So we will continue to identify those, and for those individuals that still want to get a PPP loan. So there is funding still available. Also up today on May 12th, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Portal's open. The portal has been open now for, this is the 10th day. A lot of things happening in the portal, a lot of things happening with the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and we'll go through that and some of the information for those that aren't in. Again, all I can do is do like I did last Wednesday and stress that if you want to apply for this particular fund, you need to get in as soon as possible. We are pretty much certain, although we've been wrong before on this, speculating about funding and how long it's going to last. But we are almost certain that funds for the Restaurant Revitalization Program are not going to last, and it is going to be an oversold program into it. We had kind of an idle, I call it an idle April. Had Corey Williams come on from the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program and talk about a lot of the solutions that they are finding, a lot of the new programs. EIDL's really evolved in 2021 with newer programs and different programs and enhancements to the EIDL program, the COVID Economic Injury Disaster, COVID-19. Started pretty much all the programs. It's what I like to call the granddaddy of the pandemic relief programs, as it was open around the 19th of March. So the EIDL's out there, and the 19th of March, I mean 2020, before we even knew where we were going with this thing. And we pretty much know now, I think, until tomorrow. So we have EIDL solutions to go through. The Shuttered venue operators grant remains open. And I'm really appealing to those that are out there that might have any specific type questions. Conversations that I have had with a lot of individuals who are pretty much, I'd like to call them in the now or in the know. We're starting to really kind of get the realization that this is more of an urban program. The venues and the entertainment are more an urban and large city. And we're really seeing that, I think, in the applications and talking to my colleagues throughout the Central California region. So it is not only us that's only seeing, maybe a half a dozen or less applications that are flowing through here. And when we've polled, it's always polled relatively low, but it is an outstanding program for those that have venues and that have been shuttered. And that even can go down to a small nonprofit that's that produces plays in smaller cities as well. So it remains open. If you have any specific questions, I tend to gravitate toward this specific group out of SBDC, and they have on Thursdays an office hours segment for individuals like me to come in and ask them specific questions. It is, of course, the program that the SBA called one of the most difficult grants that they've ever administered. So we hear a lot of the rumor is a lot of the smaller businesses aren't in, and it's really kind of being dominated, I would assume, by larger entertainment meccas. I'm sure there's been some in Vegas and Broadway and other places. So if you have any questions though on that, we're going to be doing a shift, obviously, that is going to be moving from kind of a grants management to reopening and or toward grants management and looking at all these. So as we kind of evolve over the next few weeks and get much deeper into PPP, I'd hope to get into a lot of the PPP 2021, but there's just not a lot of information out there. So we'll cover where we are with 2020 PPP and some other things, but really this grant management and utilizing the funds in the way that they were intended by the proposer and by the grantee is enormously important, and is really something I think if you have multiple grants that you've received, obviously some of them actually reconcile themselves out, like the Ppp forgiveness process or maybe the current recovers actual process for forgiveness. So a lot of them do have kind of a built-in mechanism, but it's using those other funds that are available, those other expenditures, and making sure that you've spent these in the proper ways. Full reopening continuing, and June anticipated. Numbers absolutely fantastic down here in the South San Joaquin Valley. Kern County reporting great numbers again on COVID infections and on infection rates, and on a number of the other mandated statistics that are kept at the state level. And also some news in our 3-county region. Mono County, hey, you're in the yellow. Congratulations. Mono, a lot of it is kind of waiting for summer to hit their next new wave. Winter and summer, baby, winter and summer. So as we shift out of May and into June, it'll be summer, and in places like Mammoth Lakes and June Lakes, and up in other areas in the North County, the Walker River for fishing, and those areas are all now yellow. So congratulations on that. We're also going to continue to talk about the employee retention tax credit for 2020 that is open. That's the fourth quarter. And then also 2021 is open in the first quarter and will end on June 30th. So the ERTC, and we have a number of other grants that we're going to go along with as well. We're going to take your questions. If you have questions today, gladly place those in the Q&A box. We'll have a lot of resources in our chat box, so go to our chat box for our resources. I'm going to pass on the poll for now. I will not forget, I'll come back to it. But first, our CSUB Vaccination Hub, this is the last call. It's going to be closing on Friday. So May 14th is the last chance to get vaccinated in the Southwest at CSUB. Vaccination Hub vaccinated thousands and thousands of individuals. And they've been using ever since April the 12th, the Pfizer vaccine. So if you have any other questions, go to those particular links, myturn.ca.gov or csub.edu/vaccines. So we'll go through this right here and then our poll. I won't forget the poll because I think it's got some good information and holds some valuable information mainly because of, a lot of things that are going on with some other studies and things. But as you know, the PPP, as we had talked about last week, to most lenders closed for both the first draw of 2021 and the PPP second draw for 2021. As many of you saw and witnessed last week, we were looking desperately for potential lenders to get our programs. And we have CDFI lenders that are available. And one of them that is one that, we'll talk about is lendistry.com. Lendistry.com, familiar to many of you because of them actually managing the portal and the application process for the California Relief Grant. And the California '21, in my opinion, that's the place to go. Now, lendistry.com, generally, at the SBDC, I make no referrals. I like to, if I do make a referral, it's to multiple entities, multiple credit unions or community banks, etc. You've heard that for many, many, many times. But right now, lendistry.com says they're going to be open until May 31st doing PPP first draw 2021 applications and also the second draw. So if you haven't got in, and if you have a potential sticky situation with another lender, potentially that actually didn't get your deal done, there's a few things that you can do. One thing, when it ended last week, it caught everybody off by surprise. Even those that were starting, to forecast an early May closure were surprised because the numbers came out 2 days earlier that we will talk about. And apparently SBA has held back, about at least 14 billion and maybe more of the money, because last week we were talking about there being $24 billion left, and that was only 2-day-old information. So we had talked on many, many occasions about a lot of the hold codes or error codes or validation in January and February, calling in with issues with your application being held. One of them was simply if your Ppp forgiveness for 2020 was in process and you'd applied for a Ppp second draw. It was that simple. It actually created a problem initially that I think they resolved. So there were billions of dollars of these loans that were in process. And there's a lot of different actually remedies that are out there based on your situation. If you're with a lender right now and yours was held up because you were on hold, there was an SBA review, it really comes down to if you were in the SBA system. If you were given an E-Trans number and are in the system, you really should try to probably work with your lender to get it fixed as soon as possible. The rumor on the street is they have money that they're holding for these holds, but it's likely to be gone by this weekend. So May 15th could be your last day. If you are already in the system, you have an E-Trans number from SBA, your lender has uploaded that, and for some reason you have not been able to resolve it. So that is one particular issue. If you haven't applied at all, then find a CDFI. Again, lendistry.com, we don't receive any financial considerations from anybody, Lendistry or anybody, for these particular programs. I don't sit here and say go to Lendistry because we make money on the back end. It doesn't happen that way. It's a conflict of interest for every SBDC program across this country and something we take very seriously. Lendistry did come into an agreement with the California SBDC, but over the California Relief Grant, I think over our efforts, I think it was after the fact. No, none of that money is focusing down to us. So I just want to make that clear that when I say go to lendistry.com, that's who I would go to right now, particularly if I filed a California Relief Grant, because they have a lot of my information. If you want to go somewhere else, continue to look online for CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions. I called several last week before the webinar after I had heard that it was closed except for CDFIs, and none of the ones that I called, even very large ones, were not operating anymore in the PPP world. So that is kind of a little bit. We'll do a little bit more on PPP, but if you have a PPP in process, you need to find out if you have an E-Trans number. If you don't, it's easy to take it somewhere else and to take it to Lendistry or another lender if you're of your choice. So continue to look at that for those of you that are still seeking PPP. We also have, as we mentioned, the venues for shuttered venues, the Shuttered and the SBA portal for that particular program is open and serving clients right and left. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund is open, and you'll go to a different portal, the SBA's RRF, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund portal. It's open. Went through our initial feeling last week on that, and we'll jump into that a little bit more. And we'll do a little bit more information for those of you that still want in. It still seems to be kind of the hottest game in town, even though we're 10 days into it. 10 days into it means those of you that are unserved as identified by the SBA still have 11 days to get in. You still have 11 days to get into the portal and be considered during that first 3-week period that is only open to you. So if you are not in that, again, get yours in as quickly as possible. Employee retention tax credit. Heard so many great things after Michael Stevenson's presentation on this a few weeks back. A lot of people are really getting into this. Employee retention tax credit is something you might want to look at. Consult your attorney or your tax advisor or some other advisor that deals with those particular situations for you. Notifications are coming soon. We're hearing a lot of real positive things, individuals that are getting funded. So that is good. Also, the EIDL loan. We'll talk a little bit more about the EIDL loan and some of the reconsiderations today. I've promised you, I have, that we will discuss more on the family leave tax credit. Again, the family leave program is getting into more of an HR issue, which I'm more of a finance guy rather than an HR guy. So you'll see our focus continuing to go toward the financial pandemic relief programs, remedies, and other cash flow, et cetera, things for small businesses. The City of Bakersfield's Restart Loan to Grant program remains open, and they have had numerous approvals in that particular program. What you want to do is you want to contact our friends at Access Plus Capital. Eddie Palomar has an office in downtown Bakersfield, a few short blocks away from our office within the self-help credit union. So, talk to Eddie if you want to do something with the Bakersfield City to Restart Loan to Grant program. Ppp Forgiveness for 2020 is open. Remember, that is due 10 months from the end of your covered period. I don't really see any reason why anybody would want a covered period other than 24 weeks. The initial ones were at 8 weeks, but there are so many reasons out for an additional 4 months, the due date of your PPP forgiveness. And PUA unemployment contractor is in and going on until the September 5th date. I have seen that a lot of other states are now starting to opt out of the $300 a month for PUA unemployment for contractors. I don't see that happening in California, but it is a situation to where some states are starting to give bonuses for employees to go back to work and kind of relieve some of those issues that are going on. Okay, now it's poll time. And our polls are just going to follow the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business. Many of you know that we do kind of follow their lead at times just to try to see where people are and what's going on in the particular polls. So we do have some of their information, and it's pretty much basically your PPP EIDL, multiple questions on each of these polls. So let's launch number one. And it's very simple. Did you receive a PPP loan in 2020? Yes or no? And if no, did you apply in 2021? So a two-part poll question there, and what you're going to see a lot of today. So very simply, yes or no on PPP. If no, did you apply for a 2021 version of that? And give you a few moments to vote. We're getting close to 40% of you in. And we will actually, when we hit 50, we'll give you a last call, and we're going to give you a last call right now to close the poll. We got almost 50, 8% of you in. So let's go ahead and end this particular poll, and we'll share the results with you. And here we go. Oh, wow, 50-50 on this, receiving one for 2020. And if no, did you apply in 2021? And there you go, the answer, yes, 3/4. So that's been one that we have asked several times during this period. And I think the NFIB on that was 73% received one in 2020 and 27. So that might just reflect the life cycle of this webinar, being at number 61 and continuing on. So if no, did you apply in 2021? And 65% of you said yes. So thank you for that information. It's good to know, point in time. And we're going to ask poll question number 2. And it is somewhat similar, but this time, did you apply for an EIDL loan? Did you apply for an economic injury disaster loan? And still planning on applying for one? So jump in. We have about a quarter of you are in right now and voted. Simple yes and no question to if you applied for an EIDL loan, an economic injury disaster loan. And if no, are you planning? And this is the EIDL loan and none of the other grants or targeted advances or supplementals that are out there now. So just an EIDL loan. Did you apply, yes or no? And we have 54% of you in. That's a nice sample size. Thank you for participating. We're going to end the poll and we're going to share the results right now. And look at that, another 50-50 split. Half of you have. So whereas our national federation was almost 3/4 to 1/4 on PPP, they were pretty close to 1/4 to 3/4 no on EIDL. And I guess we're a little more balanced right there in the middle. How can you beat that? And if no, are you planning on applying for one? 38% of you said yes, which is substantially higher than the National Federation of Independent Business poll that was conducted on April the 28th. So still fresh, that poll, and interesting. And we have one last question for you. And let's share poll question number 3 before we move on. And it has to do with Ppp forgiveness. If you received a PPP in 2020, have you applied? Have you submitted for forgiveness? Yes. No, I'm not ready. No, my bank's not ready. And then if yes, have you received a final confirmation of your approved forgiven amount? So this is for those that actually received the PPP in 2020. We're curious to find out if you've applied and submitted for forgiveness, and if not, then, or if so, actually, have you received a final confirmation of that? So, well, we have a good portion of you in, and I realize this is only for those that received the PPP, so we have a little smaller, close to 40%. So let's go ahead and end this poll and share these results with you. Yes, you've already submitted for forgiveness, 43%. 57% of you are no, with it pretty much being split that you're not ready yet and your bank's not ready. So 43% yes, 57% no. And the second part of the question, if yes, have you received a final confirmation of the amount? And thank you. Information to have and to see how locally, how we're trending with the nation on some of these questions. A little farther off this time. Earlier we were really close, but again, it might just show the maturing factor and why people are here today rather than maybe webinar 25. So thank you for that. Okay. Get back to our screen here. There we go. So moving right along now. Last week on the PPP, as you know, I want to go back and correct one thing I said that appears to be different now. And last week we had breaking news on May 5th that PPP funding had been exhausted except for small Schedule C filers. Well, I believe that should be except for those applications accepted by community development financial institutions or mission-driven community banks. And that is still true with about 8 billion of which they're not sure is going to be all spent. So there really is an opportunity here to still get in for PPP 2021, either the first or second draw. So I know there's still a lot of individuals who are still learning about the program. I shared last week, I went door to door on Tuesday who hadn't actually applied yet or had considered applying last year and realized that it really wasn't much of a benefit for them. But that changed on March 3rd with being, especially for Schedule C filers, it changed on March 3rd, where they could use a different calculation. So on May 12th, today, our PPP 2021 news is a little bit different. Yes, it's exhausted except for the community development financial institutions that are still accepting along with mission-driven community banks. But also it appears that applications may be accepted beyond the small Schedule C market and even the underserved market at the discretion of the local CDFI. So if you're a restaurant that didn't get in and you, for some reason or another, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund didn't work for you, this might be a way in. And also, you might look for that CDFI to get in and get your PPP loan. And you've heard some of the comments that I gave earlier when addressing my advice, at least what I would do personally would be to first try lendistry.com. Okay, so let's look at the PPP numbers. These are the numbers that we didn't share last week, or we went over very quickly because the program ended. And again, as of 3 days before the funds were exhausted, except for CDFIs, you'll see that we were at $258 billion, and 258 billion of the 284 left 26 billion, a little over 25 billion. So then all of a sudden we jumped up to this week where we actually got numbers that were pretty fresh from actually May 10th instead of the 9th. They did it on Monday this week. So what we see is that we're up to, when they shut down the program, they were up to 260 billion, which left basically 24.5 billion. And I think we identified 14 of that being held by CDFIs to the tune of 8 billion, and then 6 billion for those that had codes or other issues that were still trying to be resolved at the SBA level where they reserved the funds. So I would assume the other 10 billion would be potentially for loan fees that were paid to lenders in the program. But that's only my guess right now of what that other 10 is. But that's kind of where it stands now. It could be that extra 10 is actually also being reserved for those that have the E-Trans number for SBA in hopes that they can get those resolved. So we see the loans dollars per loan. That would be interesting, huh? 45 mil average loan size. And of course, we're at 19,000. 19,629 is the average for the last week. And then it rose slightly with this abbreviated week to 24,000. So those are some of the numbers. Again, on PPP, when we jump into this, you can now elect, if you're a sole proprietor, line 7, which is the gross income number. Big difference between that and net income. We've talked about the big benefit and the game changer that this has been for a lot of sole props, particularly your very small mom and pop businesses and others. So that's an application process, the sole props. But really where we're seeing the opportunities with sole props are, again, those that looked at a 2020 PPP, but they had fewer zero employees. They maybe didn't show a lot of net income. Maybe they had a good accountant and didn't show a lot of net income, and it wasn't worth applying. But if they had gross revenue of $100,000, they would be entitled to 20,833 by just electing the 24-week covered period. So and I will continue to talk about this every week until this money's gone. And if you do know of a underserved business, somebody you're working with, a small business or anybody, please pass them information that this is still available, that these monies still can be had. And hopefully our smallest small businesses that haven't heard or didn't think that this would benefit them can still get in. So there you see a few other situations. If you had an extraordinary item, good tax planning might have erased a net income, and then also some student loan issues, and kind of jump from there. So right now, let's go jump up here. We had talked a little bit about, and this will be in our this will be available. I hope it's going to make it to the chat. It's COVID and the Family Medical Leave Act, the questions and answers put out by DOL. It's really comprehensive and has a lot of great questions on the responsibilities and also some of the tax credits that are available to small businesses who might have employees that might need to take a leave as a result of COVID-19. So look into this. This is kind of really that you didn't know much about. So I would have been in that 83% and probably still am, as again, HR and me, more of a finance guy. Just really, you really need a good, true professional that knows this stuff, either an HR consultant or an HR attorney or someone. So a lot of great information there, though. So there's that information. Talked a little bit about Lindustry, and Lindustry, this is their website, and they are accepting applications. They are based in California, but they're taking applications in all 50 states, and you can apply online. And again, one of the reasons I like an application through Lindustry is that if potentially you signed up for the California Relief Grant, then they have a lot of your information already, and it's going to make the process much smoother, I would think. So that's the Lindustry site where you can go, still get a PPP loan. PPP 2021 is still available through your CDFIs. So on forgiveness now, we talked a little bit and had a nice poll question on it. Here's some of the official SBA data as of May 10th. And we saw the number of PPP loans that were done before August of last year totaled 5. None of them have been forgiven now. And in the past, SBA has been shown an amount not forgiven, and it had been about 800 million. So it had been about $800 million that was out there that had not been forgiven. And remember, it's not a totally bad thing if you had an amount of money that was not forgiven on your PPP loan. So, you have those expenditures that has to go 60% for payroll, 40% for other items. Those other items you actually increased if you hadn't filed for PPP forgiveness on 12/27/20 with the Economic Aid Act. So changes there, and on some of the areas that you could actually use outside of payroll, but still 60% is the golden number. There's your forgiveness by dollar volume, and there's your 8.8 billion that was not forgiven. And still 176.8 billion in applications not received yet for forgiveness. But remember, getting the loan and spending it was only a half of it. You've got to get it forgiven. So we'll get through the forgiven process. And again, you have 10 months from the end of your covered period. And your covered period is likely going to be 24 weeks from the date you receive the money. Let's jump in here and just look at a couple of the forgiveness forms. These are a couple of the forgiveness forms. The two easier ones, there are 3 total forms. This is the form 3508S. It is the one that actually you can only use if your PPP was $50,000 or less. Pretty simple contact information. And then what you're doing is you're certifying that you used the money appropriately, that your 50 grand went for the proper uses, and sign it and attest and sign it under the perjury of law. And then the second page is just this demographic information form. That's optional, but of course, as I always do, I encourage you to fill it out. So that's the 3508 form. We'll be getting into these a little bit more in the next week or 3. So, and then there's also the 3508 EZ form. And sure, EZ came before the S, the short form. And there's also the 3509 that originally was, I believe, an 11 or 14 page document that now is 5 pages. We won't go through that right now. But again, here's what you do is you have a checklist that you go over and you look at these particular questions and answer them accordingly. A quick example. As we start getting back into our Excel spreadsheet, that those of you that have been around for a while got a good dose of last summer, the end of last summer, early fall. So that's easy form. And again, it's going to come down to you attesting that under penalty of perjury that you spent the money wisely and that you actually meet either the the full-time equivalent, or you meet a safe harbor. So a little bit different there, and this is for 150 and under, can be used by others. So that's a little bit on forgiveness. Real quick, I mentioned the form, the Excel spreadsheet form. You'll recall that this was it. This will come out next week. Not really prepared to get deeply into this today because I still want to allocate plenty of time to the RRF and to EIDL, and it's getting a little bit later. But real quickly, here's an example of the actual forgiveness form, the 35EZ in a spreadsheet version. And just real quickly, this is a $100,000 PPP, so you needed to meet 60,000 in payroll. Different levels of payroll. At 78, it was totally actually forgiven, the $100,000, because 78,000 went for payroll costs, the remainder for other eligible expenses. This actually 58,000 is under the 60,000, so it did not meet that guideline, but it is not an all or nothing. It is a sliding scale that slides to that. So 96.67% of that was actually forgiven. And then in a worst case scenario, you missed it by $16,000 of your payroll. Maybe the rest of it was ineligible expenses, but then it comes down to less is forgiven. So that's an example of the forgiveness forms and going through that. We have also an example here of a strategic election on why you might take 8 or 24 weeks. Right now, I don't see any reason even right now. It's just, I would say 24 weeks unless somebody can give me a better reason. I don't see one. 24 weeks is what I believe everybody should take. There could be examples out there that are different. Maybe you need to get something off your books as quick as possible to meet other covenants or restrictions in any loans or equity or ownership of your particular business. So maybe that will affect some balance sheets and maybe some percentages that go. So, we have our form that we were trying to, that we used, and these are last year's dates in here, and based on last year's PPP, we will get this updated and we'll present it again next week and maybe have this available for everybody next week. So some changes we have now in the EIDL program. And we've had a lot of changes in 2021 with a webinar that we sponsored with Mid-State Development Corporation, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Kern County, the Kern County Black Chamber of Commerce, We went over some really great EIDL changes back in April. And really, to the extent of that is, the big news for me was EIDL is now a 24-month period and no longer 6 months. And that happened because originally we were hoping this would be a 6-month issue or 6-month problem, but it's turned into something much longer than that. And SBA recognizes that. So your EIDL funds can now be used. Your EIDL loan can be used for working capital, notes payable, and other expenditures, but mostly working capital, notes expenditure, notes receivable, over a 24-month period of time rather than 6 months. And your payment has been deferred to next year, but the interest still accrues. The EIDL, the targeted EIDL and supplemental EIDL grant have now been introduced, and we'll touch on that. This is from $150,000 to $500,000, or at least it does potentially. Some businesses really needed that $500,000, and there's a process to where if you've actually emailed SBA, they're giving you the opportunity to reapply at a larger amount. And of course, the program was extended into this year. So what do you do to increase an EIDL loan? So you want to go from that 150 to 500. Well, if you haven't discussed it with them previously, what you would probably want to do is probably email SBA at COVID EIDL increase request, and that's with an S, request at sba.gov. If you've already done that and SBA has invited you to go in and actually resubmit, and even after that, hopefully they will then allow you to go in and to look at that. And you can log into your SBA loan portal. And there it is right there, COVID-19 Relief 1 at .sba.gov. Remember, sba.gov on all this. It's got to be sba.gov, not .com, not sb.gov, sba.gov, please. Thank you. Click the button to request additional funds, and you'll need to disclose any changes in your business if there's been a change in ownership, if you've had a subsequent bankruptcy or anything else. They'll ask you to identify which tax filing form you use for your business. Is it an 1120 for a corporation, a 1065 for a partnership, or LLC, a 1040? And then complete a 4506, which of course gives them the authorization to pull your tax information from the IRS and then use it in considering your request. And then you do hit the submit for request. So that's kind of the process for going through getting a larger EIDL. Now the supplemental targeted EIDL we heard about last month. And essentially it's those that have already benefited from the targeted EIDL advance. Maybe you were at $3,000 and you were in a low income area and you met the 30% drop in an 8-week period. Then you were actually able to be uplifted to that $10,000 amount from wherever you were. Could have been 9,000, could have been 1,000. So then SBA, what they did was they came up with the new supplemental, and those individuals who have received the targeted EIDL advance are now available, or are now possible for them to actually get an additional $5,000. And that's the supplemental greater than 50% reduction in sales or gross revenue during any 8-week period. That is any 8-week period. And then also not employ over 10 individuals. So your email for consideration on that is the targeted advance. And this is for if you've been declined. So if you were actually requested to apply for a targeted EIDL and were denied, this is the process that you would take for reconsideration. Now, one thing I don't think you'll have a great deal of success in is to go through the route of actual reconsideration because your census map says you're not low income. Trust me, I've heard from numerous communities out there that disagree with that. And my only advice is to contact your congressman or your state or your US senator. I would think that's the only way. I don't think there's any workaround with SBA on those particular census tracts. So in your email subject, you'll want to put the text above your targeted advanced reevaluation at sba.gov. And you'll want to put a targeted advanced evaluation, reevaluation, and your 10-digit application number, your 10-digit EIDL why you were declined and have information on that. So copy and paste that in. And then also some of your contact information. You're going to need that. And then also try to provide an explanation with documentation that addresses the reason for the decline and use that to try to sway SBA's decision. Try to come up with that information that why you would actually be able to, maybe it's they got your address wrong. Maybe there could be a lot of different factors, or maybe you had a typo in your address to begin with. That could be something that would be, I would think, an easier fix. So again, what you're going to do is you're going to ask for a reevaluation for the targeted EIDL advance, and then hopefully that would then lead to the supplemental advance. So shuttered venues, shuttered venue operator grants, again, they're still being accepted. Again, kind of mentioned a lot on this as being more of maybe an urban program, an entertainment aspect of it, but we're seeing a lot in our rural areas. And I got to view last week one of our venues in our 3-county area. So that was exciting. So applications, again, they're a first come, first served basis. They are actually slotted toward the greatest amount of loss. With the shuttered venues and also the Restaurant Revitalization Program, you can go back into your portal and you can check your status. So you go from, and I'm just kind of winging it here. So you go from submitting, and then it goes for SBA for evaluation to, evaluate and make sure that you're a legitimate business. And then it goes to the next step, which I believe is then under consideration or underwriting. And then after that, it would jump toward either a decision, hopefully on approval, or maybe waitlisted, depending on the time your application came in. So be aware that in your portal, you have a lot of information that you can go into, both for the shuttered venues and for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So what I really want to, my ask today is if anybody is interested still in this program, I do meet fairly regularly. We didn't meet last week. We're meeting this week with SBA. They're Washington, D.C. people. They hold a specific office hour segment for SBDC professionals such as myself to come in and ask very specific questions. They realize that this is a very tough and very demanding process. It's a very demanding grant. They've called it their most difficult grant they've ever administered. So I think that potentially there's still funds in this program. But again, we're in a more rural area, and it seems to be one that's vetted heavily toward urban areas with a lot of entertainment options. So let's jump into the RRF and look at it. We did a very extensive walkthrough of this particular program using the SBA slide deck in webinar 59. We'll cover a number of these slides in a few minutes and go through just to give you the basis. Really go back into our YouTube channel at CSUB SBDC, and you can go back and view webinar 59 if you really want the complete program. Also, there's a lot of programs that are being offered. And really, this is the information that came last Friday. Was as of the first 2 days, SBA received 186,000 applications, basically from all 50 states, DC, and 5 US territories. And a number of those that came were controlled by women, veterans, socially and economic disadvantaged individuals. So what you're seeing is a lot of those that jumped in, or some combination of the three, because you can remember, you could be in a partnership with 2 other individuals. And let's put myself in the partner, okay? I'm not a veteran, I'm a white male. So a woman and also either a veteran or a social or economic disadvantaged individual, well, then all of a sudden it jumps to 67%, which is greater than 51 and would be a combination of the three. So also we have 61,000 businesses because there is a fund, a pool aside, a set aside funds for 500,000 in annual pre-pandemic revenue. So our smallest restaurants, bars, bakeries, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, saloons, taverns, breweries, etc. Because these are all the eligible businesses. Many of those need to have 33% of gross receipts on site or from resale sales to the public. And that includes the bakeries, brew pubs, breweries, wineries, distilleries, and also inns that offer food and beverage on site. So those are the eligibility, and we're not going to dive into a lot of the eligibility, but one of the unique characteristics is also bankruptcy. You can actually you won't be eligible if you've permanently closed or if you filed a Chapter 7 liquidation bankruptcy or filed a 7, 11, 12, or 13 that does not have an approved repayment plan or organization plan. But there are eligibilities under 11, 12, and 13. And if you meet that criteria, bankruptcy is still an option. So we get a lot, and oftentimes that the SBA deck, this is toward the end. I want to put it toward the beginning, and these are the priority groups, and they have a 3-week window. So at day 10, you still have another 10 or 11 days to jump in and still be in that priority window to where you should be funded. And that is, again, going to be small business concerns that are 51% owned and managed daily, by women, veteran, and socially and economic disadvantaged individual. Again, the process is self-certified, self-certification, and there are set-asides. Whereas we had originally, I believe, 15 billion set aside for CDFIs. That is why we still have 8 billion in the PPP program. I don't know if this will happen here because there's a lot of businesses that meet this criteria that we're talking about. But there are $5 billion set aside for applicants that have a half a million or less in gross receipts for 2019. An additional $4 billion is set aside with those that are between 500,000 and 1.5 million. And an additional 500 million is set aside for the very smallest that have gross receipts of 50,000 and less. Now, if you opened up toward the later part of the year, I believe it is going to be annualized. And when we get into that criteria in just a few moments, as I need to kind of speed things up. So there's our socially disadvantaged individuals, and they include Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, or subcontinent Asian Americans. Economic individuals that are disadvantaged are those socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities. It almost sounds like our rural communities that I visited last week in Inyo and Mono County. So, because there is definitely an issue with access to credit and some of the other things. So that is, again, self-certification on your part. So, how do they affect other SBA relief programs? Generally, if you've received a PPP loan, generally those will be reduced from your award. But the very bottom is very important. You cannot have a pending application for or received a shuttered venue operators grant from SBA. So if your EIN has been, if you've used it to apply for a shuttered venue operator grant, please do not do this. Either get it withdrawn or jump into this one as time permits. Again, as with all programs that we talk about, all applicants must certify that the current economic uncertainty makes the funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. I'm afraid when we learn the actual true definition of that, it is going to be at somebody's expense. So please use that paragraph accordingly and move on from there. Here are some of the eligible funds. We have a number of business expenses that you use in your business, from payroll, utilities, facilities, and raw materials, suppliers, etc. Construction costs for outdoor seating. Please note that expansion costs are ineligible. They're not eligible. So if you're looking to expand your existing restaurant, maybe your drive-through, maybe you need a triple drive-through now after COVID, won't work. Business debt also works, and so a combination of both mortgage and non-mortgage debts will work for that particular program. Really, one of the nice things that I keep talking about are the period that the funds can be used, and they can be used from February 15th, 2020, about a month before we really learned about the full onset of COVID, until March 11th of 2023, which is, still 22 months away. So, and there's conditions. If your business closes, you can use the funds, but you're going to have to provide a detailed expenditure report and certification for the period that you've used the funds if you have an award. So please, you're going to have to account for these grant funds and show that they were used for this particular program and possibly not for any others. We have three calculations. The first, relatively straightforward: your 2019 gross receipts, and then subtract your 2020, that for most businesses are less because of COVID. Calculation number two is prorating, because your business opened in 2019. So you go through a calculation process to prorate. And calculation number three is for applicants that began, on January 1, 2020 through March 10th of 2021. So, and many of those could be businesses that had not opened, but also incurred eligible expenses as of March 11th, 2021. So finally, some of these people that had projects in place are actually being taken care of, which is, I think, a good thing. So what can you exclude from your 2020 gross receipts? Of course, your pandemic relief programs should be excluded, including PPP EIDLs, other CARE Acts funding. How do you apply? Several different ways. You can apply at the SBA platform at restaurants.sba.gov. You can apply through a point of sale, POS system, if you have one, through a variety of different vendors that operate those. There's a list, I believe, of those, and it's actually, what I hear, is the most easiest way to apply. So if you go through your point of sale vendor, be it maybe Toast or Square or many others out there, check to see if they are actually an application point through for this particular RRF program, or the telephone 844-279-8898. So, get your documents in order. Do fill out the SBA Form 3172. Do that. Be prepared for the 4506 IRS form, and then have documentation that's available. So when you jump in the portal, and here are some forms of documentation you might want. And so, grab this stuff, go to the portal, go to your POS system. I wouldn't recommend the telephone, but if you need to, go right ahead. But do jump in, and if you're having problems, do jump in and contact the SBA at their center hotline. And again, that number is 844-279-8898. Almost a jingle there, huh? Okay, so also you can provide our local SBA district offices. Many of them are providing assistance, and many of them in multiple languages, so please keep that in mind. I know in the Fresno district yesterday, we had our center up in Regional Center in Modesto offered one in Spanish. So there are probably things online as well to where you can actually find a recording of that. If you can't, I can track it down for you. So we went through the pilot period. Now this is the priority period, days 1 through 21. where only applications from small businesses, veterans, social, and these are actually, I heard they were going to begin to fund as early as today, with thousands of them already being approved. And you obviously have to fit that actually preferred group in order to actually have already had it funded. But there are literally thousands that are ready to fund or have already funded for small businesses owned by women, veterans, and social and economic disadvantaged individuals. We'll be back next week with number 61. Let's jump to your questions right now. See what you got here for me. Do my dreaded stop share. You know I don't like that. But okay, so getting into these questions. Let's see what we have here. Let's jump to chat first. So jumping into the chat, boy, I see our producer Maureen has done another fabulous job of keeping you up and going. So let's see. I hope you got your sound issue fixed in the chat. Here's a question. Let's start with a question here. Got my first PPP draw a few weeks ago, and we'll be using it over the next few weeks for payroll. When can I apply for a second one? Do all my payroll payouts have to be done? Thanks. You know, our understanding is that you can apply for the second draw of PPP once your first draw has been exhausted. Exhausted is an exhausting word that's been used way too much the last week to identify PPP. But yeah, you know, generally it's that first one has to be completely done. It doesn't have to go through any forgiveness process. But if you can identify the date of when you use those funds, you still might be able to get into a CDFI and apply for the second round. So I think the key would be to be able to have that 60% go for payroll or more, and then 40% for other expenditures, and still leave some time left in order to actually apply before the May 31st deadline. See some great resources in here. We have the Lindustry customer service. There's their call center phone number, the Family and Leave Medical Act. I guess I've talked enough about that. So here's a question. Do I include any transfers I made from my EDD account to my primary checking account? Also, do I include the $5,000 grant from the state? And I'm assuming that these amounts, I am worried that these are going to put me over the 30% threshold. So that 30%, this is why they have different percentages, obviously, to help me. That would be the targeted EIDL advance. And, you know, my understanding is on those programs, it's the same thing. Is you don't include, you pretty much go over gross revenues, and you don't include your, you know, I have not been able to research if you have an EDD account, if you've had any PUA unemployment. So I will stop short of that one. But as far as into gross revenues, I will say that the money from the state grant and also local funds generally are not counted toward that threshold. See some great information in here for the EIDL if you need any of these links. And you do know that we do send out the links. We sent it out this last week on Friday around 7:37. We identified Lindustry then as being a source open. And oftentimes we will generally just send our links out that are here in the chat and other ones that we talk about, and any other information that becomes important since the webinar, like finding on Thursday of last week that Lindustry was open and accepting. We will send out that. This last week, we determined that it was so important that we sent it to our entire mailing list. So usually if you sign up for the webinar and attend, you will get the links. You'll get a copy of the recording a day or two afterwards. This week, we thought it was such important information to get out to a lot of our small businesses that we sent it to our entire, I don't know, 9,000 person mailing list. and some other things there. And yeah, May 19th will be webinar number 62. Okay, Q&A, here we go. Is the PPP loan the same as the RRF? No, two entirely different programs. PPP is an acronym for the Paycheck Protection Program, which started last year and actually had a 2020 version to it and now has a 2021 version. So the PPP is the forgivable loan if you meet the qualifications. And the qualifications are generally not real difficult. If you have some planning and have some expenditures during that time. I know with the first round last year, we had some businesses that had issues spending their PPP because they were closed. But now businesses are at least open partially and moving toward full opening. So the PPP loan is different. The PPP goes through a lender. The RRF is a Restaurant Revitalization Fund that goes through an SBA portal. So it goes through a website that the SBA has to where you can actually go in and you fill out the information in that particular portal. And again, remember, we have free one-on-one consulting at the SBDC. If you sign up, if anybody has questions on how to access this particular fund, the SBDC will be happy to have a consultant meet with you and assist you. And we have consultants that speak multiple languages. Ooh, this is a good question. If we are now in the safe harbor, business is restricted by percentage. I believe that we're going to end up, I don't want to speculate on PPP 2021, PPP 2020, with businesses shut down so much during that period, going back to late November and having basically everything closed again. The safe harbor for many businesses was pretty easy to meet. Again, it's a business by business thing, but that's getting your FTEs. 2021, we don't know if they're going to change or actually stay the same or which direction they're going to go. So let's see, we have also the targeted idle. I have a question here submitted for the targeted idle from a corporate account. Additional 500. It was before the additional 500 will be available. Yes, SBA will contact you if they contacted you for the targeted idle advance, that the 2021 version. Then if you were able to access that, they will contact you and you'll have to meet those criteria that we talked about, being 50% reduction over a 5-week period, or excuse me, what is it, a 30-day period? 30-day period for that. And then also some of those other requirements of being in the low income area, et cetera. Okay, so I received an EIDL loan in 2020. Can I get an EIDL loan in 2021? The process you're going to want to do is you're going to want to seek an increase. So we went through kind of the increase process that you need to go, and we covered that on the one slide where you can actually email SBA and ask for an increase, and then you'll go into your EIDL portal and actually submit a application for, it's not really an application, it's just an increase on how much money you want, and they could ask you what you want it for and a few things like that. So if you received an EIDL loan in 2020, the actual loan, you can get an increase in 2021 up to $500,000. Now, if you received an EIDL loan for $500,000, and those were available very early in the process, about the first 2 or 3 weeks, late March and early April of 2020, if you received that for $500,000, you're at the maximum. But then it dropped to $350,000 and then subsequently to $150,000 for the longest period, and you can actually get that increase. So that would be the process to do that. I'm a Schedule C filer, and I have not received any PPP in I was told by my bankers that funds were exhausted before they submitted my first draw. That can actually be a good thing. Right now, can you provide a list of CDFI and mission-driven banks? Right now, I only know of lendistry.com that is open and doing that. We did contact our local CDFIs in our region, and they are not doing PPPs. One of the largest CDFIs contacted them in California, and along with many others. So we're still kind of starting off with Lendistry. There is a national list of CDFIs. Mission-driven banks, there is one in the northern part of the San Joaquin Valley that is called Beneficial State Bank. In the southern part, we don't have it. So right now, I believe they're only taking their existing customers or clients, but I'm not positive on that. So let's see, next question. I hope, Clarence, your question was answered. If not, send me an email. And anybody, this is open to everybody else. Send me an email. I know we're running long. kbearden@csub.edu if you have a question after this. Okay, I applied for round 2 through another lender 2 months ago, and they didn't fund, and they don't have an easy way to talk to a loan rep. Is there an alternative way to find out if you have an E-Trans number? Ooh, that's a tough one. That is really something where you need a lender that you can access. Unless there is a way through online where there's an application process, if you applied through, say, maybe a major bank, which sounds kind of like that, yeah, that's a tough situation. I don't have the best answer for you because I really don't know how to find out if you have an E-Trans number other than through the lender. So, you know, in this situation, I would attempt again to try to talk to a loan rep and just ask them, tell them that, you know, this should be an area that they should be very sensitive to right now. Having an application for a small business that really needs these funds and not being able to find out information and not having your loan that actually has been processed, even though you applied 2 months ago. So I would probably hang out on their 800, their toll-free line, and try to get an answer and just try to get if you have an E-Trans number. Now you can go through and apply through a CDFI and apply through that direction. The problem you run into that is if they did submit and there's an E-Trans number, yours will come in as a second application for that and will be disqualified probably immediately. So it will look like multiple applications coming in under the same application number, and that will actually disqualify you as they have identified that in the past as being a vehicle for fraud for many of those fraudsters out there. Okay. You're welcome, Omar, and good luck. And please let us know if we can be of any assistance down the road. Hello, we looked up the law for PPP second draw, and it states you will or have used the full amount only for authorized uses. Yes, that is correct. It does not state anything about having to fully exhaust all the funds from your PPP first. So I'm confused by my statement that all funds need to be exhausted before applying. Let's read through this again. You will or have used the full amount only for authorized. I think if you can demonstrate that you will use, for example, if I have a payroll coming out on, let's just say today's May the 12th. Let's say I have a payroll coming out on May 19th that uses up all my funds. I believe that is a correct statement that you will or have used the full amount. And I've used it for payroll for authorized uses. And again, you have to, that is going to be 60% for payroll minimum. It could go up to 100%. We see clients use that. So thank you. That is good clarification. You will or have used the full amount only for authorized uses. Now, I'm thinking that stating that having to exhaust all of your funds from PPP1 is kind of like the same thing. But this says you will or have used. So being able to know that you're going to use those up by the end of the month in SBA's view does actually do that. I hope I clarified that a little bit. Well, okay. That's it again. So everybody, good luck. Again, very time sensitive on the RRF, PPP, get them in. Let's move on toward other things and forgiveness. Everybody have a great day. For Maureen Busher-Dang, our producer, I'm Kelly Bearden. Everybody have a great week. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.